Hello and welcome to Chat Tech of the Day. Here I am back again with another video for AZ-203 next module 3 and I'm going to talk about create Azure App Service API Apps. In this module, we will cover creating API management solutions using Swagger to document an API app. If you haven't come across me, then I am Nitesh Sharma. I am your host, and I am going to make sure that you pass Azure AZ-203 exam certifications. Let's go. We have already talked about the topics. Let's go again through this. We gonna talk about Azure API Apps, creating API management solutions using Swagger to document an API app. First, Azure API Apps. In this lesson, we will cover API Apps, Integration, Authentication course. Azure API Apps is a sibling service within Azure App Service that shares much of the same functionality as Azure Web Apps. Like Web Apps, API Apps has support for built-in authentication and cross-origin resource sharing, request handling. API apps also support direct integration with other Azure services such as Logic Apps and API management. So similar functionalities to Azure Web Apps integrated with Azure Logic Apps and API management, support built-in support for authentication and authorization, supports built-in cross-origin resource sharing, request handling. Integrations. API apps are available to use as actions in Azure Logic App or backend APIs in Azure API Management. With API apps, you can deploy your backend APIs to a single location or and reuse them throughout multiple application components. So you have API apps, you can integrate logic apps within them, and API apps can be managed using API management. We'll talk about all of them later on. Authentication. So Azure App Service provides built-in authentication and authorization support so that you can sign in users and access data by writing minimal or no code in your API. The authentication and authorization module runs in same sandbox as your application code. When it is enabled, every incoming HTTP request pass through it before your application code handles it. For app, in this module, authenticates user with a specified provider, validate stores and refresh tokens, manages the authenticated session, injects identity information into request headers. The module runs separately from your application code. You can configure it by using app settings. Course mechanism for servers to indicate that they support cross-site requests. Browser security prevents a web page from making requests to different domain than the one that served the web page. This restriction is called the same origin policy. The same origin policy prevents a malicious site from accessing sensitive data on another site. Sometimes you might want to allow other sites make cross-origin requests to your app. CORS is Worldwide Web Consortium W3C standard that allows a server to relax the same origin policy. In a standard CORS implementation, the JavaScript client will send a pre-flight request by using an options verb to assess the server's willingness to accept a cross-site request. If allowed, the JavaScript client will then issue a cross-site HTTP request. So if you are familiar with the REST APIs, it already happens. If you have noticed, before making a real request, it sends an option verb request, and then it's asks the server the if it allows the request, and then it makes the real request. So you can handle that course management in API apps directly without even using without even without doing much efforts from your side. So lesson 2, creating API management solutions. In this lesson we will cover API management, this terminology, service hierarchy, products, policies, and application gateway. API management, APIM. API management, APIM helps organizations publish APIs to external partner and internal developers to unlock the potential of their data and services. Businesses everywhere are seeking to extend their operations as digital platform, creating new channels, finding new customers, and driving deeper engagements with existing ones. API management provides the core competencies to ensure a successful API program through developer engagement, business insights, analytics, security, and protection. You can use Azure API management to take any backend and launch a full-fledged API program based on it. So API management streamlines the process of common tasks necessary for creating an API for external use. It includes creating a successful and useful developer portal, securing API endpoints from anonymous or unwanted access, managing existing developer access through cache mechanisms, throttling and other policies, building monitoring and analytics platform to diagnose issues and monitor adoption, providing business users and developers with deep insights into how each API is specifically used. It has different terminologies, which are backend API, frontend API, product, and operations. Backend API, an HTTP service that implements your API and its operations. Frontend API, APIM, API, and APIM API does not host APIs. It creates facades for APIs to customize and facade according to your needs without touching the backend API. So front-end, a HTTP service facade hosted by API management to obfuscate your backend API. Then API management product. A product contains one or more APIs as well as users quota and terms of use. You can include several APIs and offer them to developers through the developer portal. API operation. Each API represents a set of operations available for developers. Each API contains a reference to the backend service that implements the API, and its operations map to operations implemented by the backend service. Version. Sometimes you want to publish a new different API feature to some users while other ones want to remain with the API that currently works for them. So you can keep the existing version, but you also want the other users to test the new features. So you want to have two different versions of your API. A breaking change to front-end API, existing application will not be required to change its code as you update or change the front-end API. Then you have revision. When your API is ready to go and start to be used by developers, you usually need to take care in making changes to the API and at the same time not to disrupt callers of your API. It's also useful to let developers know that about the changes you made. Developer portal. Your customer, which are developers, should use the developer portal to access your APIs. The developer portal can be customized. So I'll go give you a demo to create an API management service instance. API management API management service instance. In this demo, I will show you create a new API management instance. Observing how to do that. So I'll say API. You have different types of products available: API app, rewards API, and then you have API management. This is what we need. So I'm going to create it. I'm in my Azure portal. If you can see this, I'll name it API AZ-203 APIM Nitesh. I'm sure it's available. My subscription is Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. Resource group, I need to create new one. AZ-203 APIM. AZ-203 APIM. Okay, location North Europe. That's very important. Organization name. Specify the name of your organization for use in developer portal and email notifications. So I just name it testing, and I give administrator email, my email, and I don't need any SLA. Let's create it. It will be validating my configuration, and after that it will tell me if it's okay or not, and then I need to press again to create it. So if I go to my resource groups, it's still processing. So basically what it does, it just creates a platform for me where I can manage my all the API apps, and then it's a nice way to handle or give keep track of my applications and provide security for my applications, provide extra layer of security actually, and uh, so my application is more secure. So now our resource is ready. I'm in my resource group AZ-203 APIM, and we have this API management in this resource group, and the status is still being activated. It takes a long time to activate API management because and I still don't have my developer portal URL, gateway URL, anything. I don't have anything. I have nothing actually. Still status is activating, but till then I'll go through this. So you have different charts here: capacity, gateway errors. So you have a dashboard actually: backend request duration, gateway requests. You have a dashboard for your APIs, and here in this pan you have activity log, where you can see all the activities related to your APIs. You can grant access management control. It is slow anyway. And then here you have APIs, where you can add your APIs, and then you can it is taking time anyway. I don't want to go in depth anyway. I just want to give you an overview about it. And you have analytics, tags, you have products, which we just talked about. You have repositories, which are really useful for the developers. And you have users. For the developer portal you have users and identities who can use it. You have OpenID Connect, you have Auth 2.0, you have everything related to your APIs to manage your APIs. So that's really an interesting thing about API management. So let's continue on our next module, not next thing: service hierarchy. Each service instance has one or more APIs that contain one or more operations. So as you know, I just shown you there are many APIs. There can be many APIs, and it can contain many APIs. So create and manage APIs in the service hierarchy can create and manage APIs. Each API contains one or more set of operations. Operations are configurable, granting control over URL mapping, query and path parameters, request and response, content, operation, response caching. So you have service API management, which is API internal API third party, and it can manage both, which is making a call to HTTP GET, and our internal API making some operations. So, and your API management is managing both. Um, I'm gonna give you a demo to create a new API, where I will create a new blank API and add an API endpoints. So let's go. Still, it's up. I'll go here, create a resource, API. We have many things. So you see, you just press API and you have lots of things which are related to APIs. API management we just did. We're gonna create API app. Web app we talked about it in another video. Okay, so let's create an API app. So first thing comes in your mind as you need to give a app name, and this app name should be unique all over the Azure websites.net. So generally that's really long. Let's name it AZ-203. Of course it's not available. If I add my name, I hope it's available. Okay, it's available. I need to change my subscription, use existing resource group. It's create new AZ-203 Nitesh. I can use the existing one which we just created. so that I don't have to delete everything separately. Yeah, and now this is interesting. App service plan. You need to select a app service plan for your API app, same as web app. And because as I talked in my previous video, we need to select this for to set your limits. So I'm going to create new service plan, and the main advantage of creating new service plan is just you can decide your own uh, costing uh, costing and pricing, which one you want. And here we have different options. I have selected the production S1. By default it selects this one, and anyway it gives you many options: auto scale, staging slots. We have already talked about staging slots. What is slots? Auto scale and daily backups, traffic manager, custom domain, SSL, storage, Azure compute unit. So it gives you many things. So I will just say okay, apply, okay, and I created my own service plan now. And application insights, okay, I say I want to create them, and now so it's validating. And just keep in mind there are two things: web Azure Web App, Azure API App. And you need to understand the difference. Let's go to the resource. It's still creating. It just taking time these days. Maybe everyone is working from home and the internet is okay. It's almost done. So what it has created, Microsoft Insight component, it created fab. Okay, it's done. We go to resource. It's taking time. I think done. Okay, still being loaded. Overview. If you go to overview, it should give me endpoint. Still loading. Okay, so our API app is configured, and here you see you have resource group name, subscription ID, URL. So this is the URL for my API app, and it should have some default thing. And if you notice here, you have the same thing as web app. There is no difference. So you see, hey, app service developers, the same thing, same portal was for web app when we created in other video, and same configuration, no FTP available by default, but you have FTP access. There is no really any change. You see here, this is almost everything is same except the icon and the name. You see security, the same type of security. So you have really no change. Okay, let's go back to our source. We just deployed this. It's again taking so long. So you see here, you can scale up, scale out. You have web jobs, same like web app, Azure Web Apps. As we saw web jobs there, you have web jobs in API apps as well. You can have those web jobs. If you want to know more about web jobs, please watch my another video on Azure Web App, because I don't want to repeat the same thing. Custom domains, you can add custom domains there. Authentication, authorization, we have talked about it in multiple videos. So everything is everything is same, almost every, I mean, it's the same thing. Okay, so let's continue. Products. Products are associations of one or more APIs. You can include a number of APIs and offer them to developers through the developer portal. You can add an existing API during the product creation. You can add an API to the product later, either from the product settings page or while creating an API. Developer must first subscribe to a product to get access to the API. When they subscribe, they get a subscription key that is good for any API in that product. If you created them APIM instance, if you created the APIM instance, you are an administrator already. So you are subscribed to every product by default. So now let's publish a portal. In this demo, we should create a new product with the terms of use statement and use as quota. Associate an API with newly created product. It's simple. We need to create a product and then we need to the newly created associate the API with the newly created product. So we have already created the API. Now we need to create a product. Let's go to. Okay, so my API management is not yet ready, so I cannot add. But in the tab products, you can just click products and add a product there, and then in the endpoints you can add in the product you can point to the API we just created. Policies, very important. In Azure API management, policies are powerful capability of the system that allow the publisher to change the behavior of the API through configuration. Policies are a collection of statements that are executed sequentially on the request or response of an API. Popular statements include format conversion from XML to JSON and call rate limiting to restrict the amount of incoming calls from a developer. So you can include these policies in your API management and you can handle a big job simply by writing some configuration. So policies are a collection of statements that are executed sequentially at the request of response of an API. A quick way to change the behavior of an API without code change to the actual backend API application. A comprehensive list of policies options can be found in API management policies here. Application Gateway. Another important thing, Azure Application Gateway is a web traffic load balancer that enables you to manage traffic to your web applications by routing based on more criteria than a traditional load balancer. This type of routing is known as application layer load balancing. Azure Application Gateway can do URL based routing and more, enable management of traffic to your web application operate as web traffic load balancer, which allows for more specific traffic routing than a traditional load balancer. So you have custom routing, session affinities, SSL termination, firewall management, and redirection. Very important. You just need to do it. An example of application gateway, how you can do it. Traditional load balancer operates at transport layer, OSI layer 4, TCP and UDP, and route traffic based on the source IP address and port to a destination IP address and port. So with the application gateway, you can be even more specific. For example, you can route traffic based on the incoming URL. So if in slash image, then the incoming URL you can send the incoming URL to this server. If a video, then you can send the incoming URL to this server. So you can really change the route of your uh, call. Lesson third, using Swagger to document an API app. Very interesting one. It's a quick way to build and consume APIs in the cloud by using the same flexibility as a web app. Quickly implement custom APIs, publish to external partner and internal developers, extend operations for the data and services. Each API can have one or more operations. API apps can be integrated into Logic app workflows. That's a really interesting one. We can integrate them in the Logic app. If you have used Swagger, then you are familiar with Swiss Buckle, and it can be installed by using Nugget Package Manager. If you have already used it, I'm sure you know this. There are three main components to Swiss Buckle. Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core.Swagger, a Swagger object model and middleware to expose Swagger document object as JSON endpoint. Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core.SwaggerGen, a Swagger generator that builds Swagger document objects directly from your root controller and models. It's typically combined with Swagger endpoint middleware to automatically expose Swagger JSON. And then you have Swagger UI, embedded version of Swagger UI tool. It interprets Swagger JSON to build a rich customizable experience for describing the web API functionalities. It includes built-in test harnesses for the public methods. So API apps, you can easily integrate Swagger. To configure it, you just need to add it in your configure service method in your startup. And if you have done it, I think you know it already. It's easy. Just need to add it in your startup.config service method in your collection of services. Simple way. And to configure it, you can then use a Swagger UI, and then you can tell the your app that your Swagger UI should point to this definition. Simple. And then to documenting the object model, the configuration action passed to add Swagger gen method adds information such as author, license, and description. And in this service, in this here you see version, title, description, terms of use, contact, license, name, etc. And then your API looks like this on your, this is the local host example, but same way it can look like this on your uh, real server. XML comments. XML comment generation must first be enabled in Visual Studio by editing the CS project file. Next, you can update the object models configuration by using include XML comments. So here you say uh, you XML component comment generation must first to be enabled in Visual Studio by editing CS project file. So you add this generate documentation file true, and then in your Swagger add Swagger generation, you include XML comments here, and you tell the path. Then you have model attribute. Decorate the model with attributes found in system.component model.data annotation namespace to help drive the Swagger UI component. Add the required attribute to the name property in to-do item list so that the presence of attribute changes the UI behavior of your Swagger. So if it sees that name is required, then it will not work without name. Simple. Add the produces application JSON attribute to the API controller. Its purpose is to declare that controller's actions support a response content type of application JSON, and then your Swagger knows that your API returns application JSON. Developers consuming the API are most concerned with what's returned. So in the response description attribute, you can add specifically response type and error codes if not standard. The response type and error codes are denoted in XML comments and data annotation. So you can have this in here. Create actions, action returns, and HTTP 201 and HTTP 400 status is returned when posted request body is null. So you see produces response type 201, produces response type 400. So Swagger knows that, and that's, I think, as a good developer you should also know these things already without even knowing Swagger. So without proper documentation in Swagger UI, the consumer lacks knowledge of these expected columns and expected outcomes. So without proper documentation, they don't know what is this, what all this is. A normal Swagger UI can look like this, and you see here ID is required when we said required in the model. So it's general UI you should have. And then in the it returns newly created item if there is any, if it created, and 400 if the item is null. So in this video we talked about Azure API Apps, creating API management solutions using Swagger to document an API app. I hope it's clear to you, and if you want to know more about API apps or web apps, I created another video where I explained more in detail about web apps, where you have web jobs as well, and I also talked about batch jobs. So if you are really interested, please explore my other videos, like, share, and subscribe this video, and stay tuned for other videos. I'm going to create whole series about AZ-203 or AZ-204. So please look at my other videos and let me know in my comment section what else you need. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.